Okay, so we get a lot of different questions from people at trade shows or inquiries over the web. But one of them is, what are the differences in programming in real time versus in a cloud environment?
For the first thing, that if you try to do cloud programming or PC programming on an embedded environment, it's just not going to work. You don't have unlimited resources. You don't have an operating system all the time on an embedded device. You can, but not always. If you program in an embedded device the way you program PC or cloud, you're probably going to be wasteful with resources, and you're going to have lockups and all kinds of problems. So that's one thing just to start.
Yeah, with cloud, your resources are pretty much unlimited.
You can definitely get into trouble with overusing it and costing yourself a lot of money by using the wrong kind of database resource or something like that, but and scaling it too fast unnecessarily. But an embed system will just lock up and die.
So we get this one a lot. So our tagline is engineering software systems that can't fail. So if we're engineering software systems that can't fail, how are we guaranteeing that the system doesn't fail? So what are we doing to ensure that the system does not fail?
You can't necessarily guarantee something isn't going to fail in the real world, but you can try to figure out what those failures are going to be and handle them gracefully.
You can't anticipate every potential hardware outside world. I mean, if it was a purely software only system that always ran in perfect hardware, yes, you could probably guarantee it, because code is code and it doesn't change. But as soon as it touches the outside world, you've got variability. So as Dave's saying, you have to make sure that you handle it gracefully, give an error to the user, and make sure that they can take action.
The biggest thing that people forget to do is log and track, so that when the error does happen, they know what happened, when it happened.
They can trace back through it and figure it out, and see what the source is.
Then you can do your work up front too, with risk management, risk analysis. Once you want to identify those areas where, if a failure does occur, would be the worst for the user. And focus on those the most.
Yeah, definitely. So if you put the same amount of effort towards trying to head off every possible error condition, you never get done. But if you do good risk analysis up front, you spend your time where the severity and the risk of harm is, and the likelihood of it happening are the highest. That's the sort of stuff you guard against to make sure that no matter what, the system never fails in that way.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of questions about RTOSs and OSs. So can you guys just kind of discuss at a high level, like what we're using on projects and embedded systems?
Seeing a lot of Linux development, open source. Everybody seems to want to go that route right now. The other big one we use is FreeRTOS. A lot of people are using that, mainly because both are free. I think is why everyone's trending that way.
And also, most of the chips are STM that we see and that we're using. We're recommending them.
It used to be we were seeing a lot of PIC, and then there was that. Now pretty much everything is STM. 32.
They're so cheap now, and they have so much capability in such a small, cheap package. And the whole Linux on an STM or FreeRTOS on an STM is like a proven platform that we've seen in a lot of different products. And also, when you go to FreeRTOS, if you're in a safety critical system, you can upgrade easily from FreeRTOS to SafeRTOS. And that also gives you a high reliability, and that costs a little bit, but you can do your development pretty much over FreeRTOS and then port it over.
And the integration of the tools for FreeRTOS and STM are just, it all works really well together. And whereas in the past you might spend a couple days writing the code to set up your chip, with all the peripherals on the chip, you don't really need to do that anymore. Now it's GUI based and easy. You just pick and choose, and it works. It gives you code. And there's lots of libraries to use for the STM. I mean, it's really,
the compilers are really well hashed out. And we used to deal with compiler problems all the time, like with PIC chips and back in the day.
You still occasionally find issues in the hardware access layers, but it's getting less and less.
but again, that's open source.
It helps.
We always get this question: what languages do we program in? Do you still use assembly? Do we still use assembly? So why do we program in the languages that we do, and what are those languages?
We have to be agnostic because we're contract based. But if we had our druthers, I mean, you probably, if you're starting a new project like on a Linux or a FreeRTOS embedded device, it's C++, right?
Okay.
So you could go with C, and maybe some people are more comfortable with C, but it's C++.
There's also a combination too.
Yeah, if there are certain parts, but there's really, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, there's no reason to go back to assembly at this point.
Not for a whole program.
No.
Maybe for like a certain section of code, you need to go really fast,
every
right?
now and again.
Yeah, but or if you're updating a system that is already written in assembly, then
you may have to use that much. Okay.
We haven't had in a while, but it does.
It does come up.
It's good to know assembly too, though, so that you can understand what the C or C++ code that you wrote is doing once it's compiled, what instructions that generates, because sometimes that's how you can find issues with your toolchain.
Okay.
So we're saying that you can have compilers actually compile incorrect code to run on the micro.
Okay.
The only way you're going to find and fix that is if you know a little bit of assembly.
Okay.
So you can crack those dusty books open.
So you have to know it all.
Dive in, yeah. But C and C++ is more than adequate 99% of the time.
And embedded, yeah.
Yeah, embedded.
When you're going into PC or cloud, I don't know, like people I guess are using C# now.
I think PC C# is pretty much.
PC's is C#.
Do you also do hardware?
We do not design boards, but we know enough to be able to troubleshoot simple issues that have direct impacts on the software.
Okay.
So we can read a schematic, but you wouldn't want us to create
it. Yeah.
We can read it and use it.
Yeah.
Read it, use it, and trace some things down, but we're not going to lay the whole board out by any means.
You don't want us to do that.
We do what we do best, and that's software.
So if I can also take this from a why perspective, we believe that we do what we do best, and we partner with other companies that do what they do best.
Yeah.
There's a couple of reasons why for that. One is if you have an engineering staff that's multidisciplined, you've got to keep them all busy. There's only like 3 ways to do that. One is find the perfect mix of projects to work on. And if you don't find the perfect mix of projects, well, then you're left with 2 options. You can either overcharge on services for the software development to cover the hardware, or vice versa. Or you can put people on things that maybe they're not really the best at. So you can have EEs writing software, or software engineers trying to do EE work. It's just somewhat less than ideal. So we found the best way to be competitive with helping our clients on and making sure that we're really the best at what we're doing, but also being competitive rate-wise, is to just focus on firmware and software.
Right.
And that's why we do that.
So we also had the question then, like, what is firmware versus software? Some people don't know what firmware is.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think typically people just say firmware when they're referring to code that runs on an embedded device, and software. Otherwise, it's all software.
It's all code.
Yeah.
It's just where it runs.
Firmware, I think, probably has a tendency to change less often.
Okay.
Too. Maybe that's why I got the name Firm.
Okay, so standards are ever changing in every environment, but specifically for medical devices, we follow certain standards, and there really are some like high level standards that are just best practices for medical device development and engineering. So what are the ones that we follow, and what do you recommend that everyone really needs to incorporate in their projects?
So there's a couple, and sort of at different levels. So 21 CFR 820 is the Code of Federal Regulations.
Okay.
And that's what the FDA refers to and says this is how you create a medical device. It's sort of like the top level.
Okay.
And then it sort of flows down into the different disciplines.
Okay.
So on the software side, there's
62304, which is software development lifecycle for medical devices. There's also ISO 1345 for the manufacturing of medical devices. We're actually certified in that for software. Also 62304 calls out to 14971, which deals with risk management. So that's how do you identify, evaluate, and plan to mitigate risks both during development and after product release, post market.
And this is something that the FDA will look for when you're submitting your medical device or approval, like either 510K or de novo process, like this needs to be.
You need to follow that,
Okay.
especially so from the software perspective. You need to make sure that you're following that 14971, 62304 combo.
Okay.
Because that's really what kind of specifically applies to software.
Okay.
13485 is like anybody that's manufacturing parts of the system. It's definitely a leg up, and it's highly recommended that whoever's working on the device, like putting it together, doing final assembly, or creating subsystems such as the software or electronics or mechanical pieces, we would recommend that they be 13485.
Sure.
Because what that is saying is that they have a standard. In our case, our standards are based on 14971, 62304 because we're software, and they follow that standard.
Okay.
So we get audited to the 62304 and 14971 based software good manufacturing practices that we have here in-house.
Okay.
So they all kind of play together, and they're different ones for different aspects of the development life cycle.
Okay, so your device is complete, you're ready to send it out to the field, it's in the field, and there's going to be concerns about protecting your IP. So whether the source code is being pulled out or in the field, how do you protect that from happening and ensure that your device is safe?
So it is possible to backwards compile the code off of the system. So if you have the right tools, you can hook up to a microprocessor and then pull out the machine code and then backwards compile it to C or C++ or whatever. But you can protect against that.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty straightforward if you have the right hardware.
Yeah, pretty much all the chips have some kind of readout protection.
Okay.
Where it won't let you read the machine code off the micro, or it encrypts it when it's there, and only it has a key to decrypt it for running.
And I think there's also stuff now, if the image changes, it'll lock you out.
So there's anti-tampering.
Yeah.
So to make sure that, if somebody does manage to pull the encrypted code out and they're trying to backwards compile or decrypt it or otherwise mess with it, that it won't allow it to run on the system.
Okay.
If you pull the code off that's even encrypted fuzz, digital fuzz, modify it, put it back, it's not going to work.
Okay.
So but the big thing is you got to turn it on.
Yes, that's the big thing people forget is they don't turn it on.
And it's really easy to forget.
So are you turning it on? Are you turning it on once it's in the field, or are you at what stage do you turn it on?
It's part of manufacturing.
The image gets flashed to the device.
Yep. If you once it's in the field, whatever is done
and you
is
haven't
done.
done that already. Okay.
You're already in trouble.
Okay. Yeah. So make sure you turn it on.
It's just a matter of turning it on. But if you don't, how many times have we seen code where chips come in and it's like, oh, you can freely read the code off. Anybody that got a hold of one of those that knew what they were doing and could buy a $35 programmer off of the internet can pull the code out of it, and they have your IP.
Wow.
And one physical way to prevent it is they take the connectors off the boards. Makes it a little harder.
Yeah.
They can pull the traces if they want.
Every little bit helps. But there's some simple best practices. Don't leave the connectors on the board.
One.
Make sure that you turn on the encryption, and if there's anti-tampering, put that on too.
Okay.
And it has to be done before manufacture, before the device goes out the door.
Okay. So 3 critical steps.
Yeah. People always ask, how do you prevent your devices from getting hacked? I think it's just a matter of making sure that you're following good engineering practices. You're not leaving the doors open, so to speak. You have good authentication that uses off-the-shelf technologies that are updated and maintained by industry. You don't try and roll your own everywhere.
Don't leave default passwords.
Yeah, I mean
These are cybersecurity best practices?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, there's a lot of very formal ones that can and should be applied, but there's also just cybersecurity starts with good common sense when you're developing.
Right.
Good engineering practice will head off probably 80-90% of the issues that you ever hear about.
Right. Okay.
Close your ports. Check your buffers. Don't guard against buffer overrun.
Yeah, that's
a really easy one to do.
Yeah. So these are just good coding best practices that start with requirements, good design, and then flowing through to just good software engineering practices frankly, there are good engineering practices that you can find for any language. There are standards all over the web.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, that's where it starts.
Okay.
And if you make your device a smaller attack vector than everybody else's,
Yeah.
then you're already off to a good start.
Right.
Sure, you can get a lot more formal than that. You can do all kinds of penetration testing, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at least, at the very least, to start with good engineering practices, and you're well on your way.
Okay.
There's a lot of hardware support now too for creating a chain of trust from the bootloader all the way up to the application code.
That's true. There's zero-touch provisioning now that you can get chips that are coming to your assembly house on your device that are already encoded with keys for.
So you don't have to touch it. You don't have to do anything with it.
And your CM can't touch it. They
Okay,
just put the chip on the board. They're not they don't get your keys. They don't have a list of keys that can be exploited or copied or misused.
Right.
The chip comes direct from the manufacturer, goes to your CM, gets put on the board, and as long as you write your code to check that chip to get its keys.
Okay.
So you actually don't even know what the keys are for the devices out in the field.
Okay.
So it's pretty safe all the way around.
All right. So and that comes directly from the chip manufacturer then.
Yeah, for the encryption chip manufacturer.
Starts there, ends there.
Yeah. They even hold insurance policies probably to make sure that.
Get insurance on your chips. Yeah.
There's also certifications for secure software lifecycle. I think it's management, engineering, and architecture. I think those are the three. So it doesn't hurt to get certified in that.
So just open-ended, but what are your tips for medical device development in general? Anything come to mind?
So one thing that we get asked all the time and that we try to guide people towards is find somebody that understands the regulatory pathway that you're going to go to bring your device to market.
Okay.
And hopefully your type of device or something in your general vicinity of your type of device, because they're going to understand how the FDA is going to view what you're doing.
Okay.
It's not just software, obviously. There's a lot more to most medical devices, though it could be a software-only device, in which case somebody that really understands the software aspect of it would be more important. But most of what we do are embedded software devices.
Yeah.
You need somebody that understands that. So finding the right regulatory person is definitely probably a first step.
Okay.
Before you ever talk to the FDA, you want that person to be there, be familiar, and help guide the conversation, to ask good questions to get the most you can out of that first meeting with them.
Okay.
And then you can apply that, and then also they'll be with you through the whole life cycle.
So
and
someone
they'll be there for your 510K or your de novo submission or whatever.
So finding a regulatory person who's worked on, say you're going with like a class 2 medical device, someone who's specifically worked on that type of device, or even more specific, someone who's worked on a particular in vitro diagnostic, or
probably the closer the better, but I bet it's more important to find somebody that you think you can work with that has a good track record.
Okay.
That's probably more important.
Yeah. So you know that they've successfully helped other companies, or they themselves have
walked through this
process and successfully had a device go through the 510K or de novo process and now approved.
And somebody that you don't mind talking to, because you're gonna have to communicate with them a lot. And if every interaction with them feels like a chore, you're not gonna talk to them when you should.
Yeah.
So find somebody that not only has some experience, but somebody you actually want to work with.
Yes. Okay.
Kind of along the same lines, I would say consider the regulatory concerns earlier rather than later in your process. Going back and doing things retroactively is always harder
and more expensive.
More expensive
Takes
than
way more time.
doing things up front.
Right. So just better planning, better understanding of what's needed throughout the entire process up front.
Right.
Probably eliminates a lot of surprises that could arise later on.
And don't underestimate the regulatory burden of all the documentation, the design work for all of the disciplines in the device development. It's no small feat. I mean, it can be as much or more of the regulatory and the overhead as it is actual development of a device, especially like the 510K pathway where you're not doing clinical trials. The overhead of doing the documentation, the paperwork, the risk management, it's all important stuff.
Right.
But that can be more than the actual device development.
Wow.
So, and that's generally with people who might have not gone through this process before, they're expecting
Maybe
the
that's
device
what they
development to
understand.
be the vast majority of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always the case.
Okay.
So get somebody that understands it early
Yes.
and talk to them and plan early.
Right.
You know, and if you're raising funds or looking for internal cash to do this, do that early.
Okay. So don't underestimate it.
Yeah, don't underestimate it.